The mist clung to the ancient pines like a shroud, heavy and unyielding, turning the forest into a labyrinth of shadows. Rain fell in relentless sheets, drumming against the leaves with the rhythm of a dying heart. Elara huddled beneath a crumbling stone archway, the remnants of some forgotten temple half swallowed by the earth. Her fingers, numb from the cold, clutched a small bundle against her chest, a fragile warmth amid the chill that seeped into her bones. The pup whimpered softly, its fur matted and slick, eyes wide with the terror of one too young to understand loss. She had found it at dusk, amid the carnage of the pack's final stand. The valley below echoed still with the ghosts of howls, the metallic tang of blood mingling with the wet earth. Elara wasn't one of them, not truly. Born to the edge of the wilds, where human villages met the untamed woods, she had always been an outsider. Her mother had whispered tales of the old blood, a curse or gift that ran thin in her veins. But Elara had dismissed them as lullabies meant to scare children straight. Until tonight, until the raid. The Alpha's forces had come like thunder from the north, armored riders with blades that gleamed under the storm clouds, their banners snapping like whips. They called themselves liberators, purging the beasts that haunted the borders of the crumbling empire. But Elara knew better. She had seen the fear in the villagers' eyes, the way they bartered secrets for scraps of safety. The wolves weren't monsters. They were guardians, ancient as the roots twisting through the soil here, and now they were gone, scattered or slain, their howls silenced by steel and fire. The pup stirred in her arms, its tiny body trembling. It was the last, she was sure. The runt of the litter overlooked in the frenzy of the attack. Its mother had fallen defending the den, her golden eyes locking onto Elara's in a final, desperate plea. "Hold him." The words hadn't been spoken, but they hung in the air, heavy as the rain. Elara had obeyed without thought, scooping the creature into her cloak and fleeing into the deepening night. Now, as the hours blurred, she rocked it gently, her breath fogging the air. "Shh, little one," she murmured, her voice a threadbare whisper. "The dawn will come. It always does." But dawn felt like a lie in this forsaken place. The forest pressed in, alive with unseen eyes. Branches creaked like bones under strain, and distant thunder rolled, masking the snap of twigs underfoot. Elara's heart pounded, a wild drum in her chest. She wasn't built for this, running, hiding, cradling the remnants of a world she barely understood. Her hands, calloused from tending hearth and field, now stained with mud and blood that wasn't hers, yet something stirred within her, a pull like the tide, urging her deeper into the woods. The pup's warmth seeped through her, awakening echoes of those childhood stories, the bloodline that bound human and beast, a bridge across the divide. She shifted against the stone, wincing as pain lanced through her side. A stray arrow had grazed her during the escape, tearing fabric and flesh. Blood soaked her tunic, but she ignored it, focusing on the pup's ragged breaths. Its eyes, a piercing silver, met hers, and for a moment the world narrowed to that gaze. Trust, fragile, unspoken. Elara's throat tightened. Who was she to this creature? A stranger, a savior, or just another fool dancing on the edge of fate? The night wore on, the rain easing to a mournful drizzle. Elara's mind wandered to the life she'd left behind, the thatched roof of her cottage, the scent of bread baking, the quiet evenings by the fire. Her father had died years ago, taken by the fever that swept the villages, leaving her to scrape by on the fringes. The wolves had been her silent companions, shadows in the mist that watched but never harmed, until the Empire's decree, no mercy for the wild ones, whispers of an Alpha King, a figure of legend, rising from the ashes of old wars to unite the packs, or crush them under his paw. A low growl rumbled through the underbrush, freezing Elara's blood. She pressed the pup closer, her free hand fumbling for the dagger at her belt, a simple thing, more tool than weapon. The sound came again, closer, circling, not human. The air thickened with the musk of fur and earth, a primal scent that stirred something deep in her core. Memories flickered, a dream she'd had as a child of running on all fours through moonlit glades, wind in her fur, pack at her heels. Madness, she told herself, just the storm playing tricks. But then eyes gleamed from the darkness, golden, unblinking, rimmed with the fire of embers. The wolf emerged slowly, massive and scarred, its coat a tapestry of midnight and silver. It wasn't attacking. It watched, head tilted as if weighing her soul. Elara's breath caught. This was no ordinary beast. Power radiated from it, a force that bent the mist around its form. The pup yipped softly, wriggling toward the newcomer, and the great wolf's ears flicked, a spark of recognition in its gaze. "Who are you?" Elara whispered, her voice trembling not with fear, but with an ache she couldn't name. The wolf didn't answer, but it stepped forward, nostrils flaring at the scent of blood on her. It lowered its head, sniffing the air, then turned its massive frame toward the path ahead. A path she knew led to the heart of the forbidden woods, where temples crumbled and secrets festered. The first hints of grey light pierced the canopy, dawn's hesitant promise. Elara rose, legs unsteady, the pup secure in her arms. The wolf glanced back, its eyes holding hers, a command, an invitation. She followed, drawn by the invisible thread of destiny, into the shadows that whispered of kings and claims yet to come. The forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the moment when night yielded to the light, and everything changed. The mist thickened as Elara trailed the great wolf deeper into the forbidden woods, each step a surrender to the unknown. The pup nestled against her chest, its warmth a fragile anchor in the growing chill. Dawn's light filtered through the canopy in pale shafts, painting the undergrowth with ghostly hues. But the forest resisted the day's intrusion. Twisted roots snaked across the path like veins of some ancient beast, and the air hummed with the low drone of unseen insects, a lullaby laced with warning. Elara's side throbbed with every movement, the wound pulling taut like a reminder of her fragility, but she pressed on, drawn by the wolf's unyielding stride. The creature moved with purpose, its massive paws silent on the damp earth, muscles rippling beneath its scarred pelt. Silver streaks caught the faint light, tracing old wounds that spoke of battles long past. Claws from rival packs, perhaps, or the bite of human steel. Elara's mind raced, piecing together fragments of the tales her mother had spun by the firelight. The Alpha King, they called him, a shadow born of the old blood, ruler of the wilds who could shift between man and monster at will. Was this him, or some sentinel testing her worth? The pup let out a soft whine, nuzzling closer, and the wolf paused, glancing back with those golden eyes that pierced like sunlight through storm clouds. She stumbled over a root, catching herself against a moss-covered trunk. The bark was rough, alive with the pulse of the forest, and for a moment she felt it, a tremor in her veins, like the wood itself was whispering secrets. Her hand lingered, and a flicker of heat bloomed in her palm, unbidden. The old blood. The words echoed from her childhood, dismissed as fancy until now. Her mother had died clutching a pendant of wolf's tooth, murmuring of a lineage that bridged worlds, humans who carried the beast within, but never fully embraced it. Elara had buried those stories with her, choosing the safety of the village over the wild's call. But here, in this place where the trees leaned like conspirators, doubt cracked open like thunder. The wolf resumed its path, leading her to a clearing ringed by standing stones, their surfaces etched with runes worn by time and rain. At the center stood the ruins of a temple, its arched entrance yawning like a maw, vines choking the pillars that once held the sky. The air here was heavier, scented with damp stone and something sharper. Wild herbs, crushed underfoot, mingled with the faint, coppery tang of blood. Elara hesitated at the threshold, the pup's ears perking at the shift in the air. This was no mere shelter. It thrummed with power, a forgotten heart of the woods where the veil between worlds thinned. As she stepped inside, the wolf circled once, then sat on its haunches, watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Shadows danced from the weak light spilling through cracks in the roof, illuminating faded murals on the walls, scenes of wolves under full moons, humans kneeling in reverence, and a great king with eyes like forged gold. Elara's breath caught. The pup wriggled free, tumbling to the ground with a yip, and scampered toward the wolf, tail wagging in blind trust. The massive beast lowered its head, nuzzling the tiny form gently, a rumble vibrating from its chest. Not a growl, but something softer, like a sigh of relief. "You saved him," a voice said, deep and resonant, echoing from the depths of the ruin. It wasn't the wolf speaking, no. The air shimmered, and the creature's form blurred at the edges, fur melting into flesh, bones reshaping with a sound like cracking ice. In moments, a man stood where the wolf had been, tall, broad-shouldered, his skin marked with the same silver scars that traced his beastly hide. His hair fell in dark waves to his shoulders, and those golden eyes fixed on her, unblinking, carrying the weight of centuries. Elara backed against a pillar, her hand instinctively reaching for the dagger, though she knew it was futile. He was the Alpha King, Kale, the name surfaced from village whispers, the one who had forged the packs from the ashes of old wars. Clad only in a loose cloak of shadowed fur, he moved with the same predatory grace, the pup now cradled in his arms like a treasure long lost. "The last of my line," he murmured, his voice roughened by disuse, laced with a grief that twisted her heart. "You held him through the night, why?" She swallowed, her throat dry as fallen leaves. His mother asked me to." In her eyes, "I couldn't leave him to die." The words tumbled out, raw and unpolished, but they hung between them, bridging the chasm of stranger and sovereign. Kyle's gaze softened, tracing the blood on her tunic. The exhaustion etched in her features. He stepped closer, and the air warmed, charged with an energy that tugged at her core, the old blood stirring, recognizing its kin. "You're no villager," he said. Not a question, but a statement that peeled back her defenses. "The scent of the wild clings to you, faint but true." He reached out, his fingers brushing her arm where the pendant's memory lingered, and a spark jumped between them, igniting visions. Moonlit runs, howls that shook the stars, a pack united under one will. Elara gasped, pulling away, the images fading like smoke. What was this? A curse pulling her into his world, or a gift she'd denied too long? Kyle knelt, placing the pup on a bed of moss, then turned to her wound. "Let me see." His touch was firm but gentle as he peeled back the fabric, cleaning the gash with water from a nearby pool that glowed faintly, as if infused with starlight. Pain flared, then ebbed under his hands, leaving a warmth that spread through her like roots seeking soil. "The Empire's hunters will come for you now," he warned, his voice low. "They saw you flee with him, but here in these woods you're under my claim, if you choose it." "Claim!" The word echoed, heavy with implication, stirring a forbidden ache. Elara met his eyes, seeing not just the king, but the loneliness mirrored in her own. A guardian burdened by destiny, packs decimated, a throne built on bones. Outside, the rain resumed, pattering on the ruins like tears for the fallen. The pup curled at her feet, sleeping soundly, and for the first time since the raid, Elara felt the stirrings of belonging, fragile as dawn's first light. But as Kale rose, his form shimmering once more toward the wolf, a distant howl pierced the mist, hunters closing in. The choice loomed, sharp as a blade. Run with the shadows, or stand with the king and awaken the beast within. Elara's hand clenched around the dagger, her heart pounding with the rhythm of impending storm. The forest whispered urgings, and she knew deep in her bones that the night had only been the beginning. The rain hammered the temple ruins like accusatory fists, turning the ground to mud that sucked at Elara's boots with greedy insistence. She stood frozen in the dim glow of the inner chamber, the pup's soft snores a fragile counterpoint to the storm's fury. Kyle's form had fully shifted back to the wolf, his massive body a sentinel at the entrance, hackles raised as the distant howl swelled into a chorus. Hunters, their voices laced with the crude mimicry of wolf cries, closing the noose. The air thickened with the scent of wet iron and pursuit, the forest's ancient guardians stirring uneasily in response. Elara's pulse thundered in her ears, drowning out the patter of rain. The dagger felt heavy in her grip, its edge dulled by doubt. Claim. Kale's word lingered like a brand on her skin, igniting a war within her, the pull of the wild clashing against the chains of her human life. She glanced at the murals, their faded wolves now seeming to watch her, eyes alive with judgment. What did she know of kings and curses? Only whispers, fragments of her mother's dying breath. The blood remembers, child. It calls when the moon weeps. Elara had fled those echoes, building walls of routine in her cottage, but here they crumbled, exposing the raw ache of isolation she'd buried deep. The wolf, Kale, growled low, a vibration that rattled the stones, urging her toward the shadows at the rear of the temple. She scooped up the pup, its tiny body warm and trusting against her chest, and followed, heart slamming like a caged beast. The passage narrowed, roots clawing through cracks in the walls like desperate fingers, guiding them downward into the earth's embrace. Torchlight from above flickered erratically, casting their shadows long and twisted, merging man and wolf in a dance of silhouettes. Elara's wound pulled with each step, but the warmth Kyle had left in her veins dulled the pain, replacing it with a strange vitality, a hum that synced with the forest's pulse. They emerged into a cavern beneath the ruins, its ceiling a vault of glittering quartz that caught the faint light like captured stars. Bioluminescent fungi clung to the walls, painting the space in ethereal blues and greens, and a subterranean stream murmured through the center, its waters clear as forgotten dreams. The air here was cooler, laced with the clean bite of minerals and moss. A sanctuary carved by time from the wild's fury. Kale shifted again, fluidly, his human form materializing beside her, naked save for the fur cloak draped over one shoulder, his golden eyes scanning the darkness for threats. He moved to the stream, dipping his hands in and gesturing for her to follow. "Drink," he said, his voice a gravelly rumble that echoed off the stones. "It binds the old blood, strengthens what sleeps in you." Elara hesitated, the pup licking at the water's edge with eager laps. She knelt, cupping the cool liquid to her lips, and it flowed like liquid moonlight, sweet, invigorating, awakening a fire in her core. Visions flickered unbidden, her mother transforming under a harvest moon, fur rippling over skin. A howl of freedom tearing from her throat before the village elders dragged her back, branding her a witch. Elara gasped, water spilling from her fingers. "What is this place?" she whispered, voice hoarse. "And you? Why me?" Kyle's expression softened, the scars on his face pulling taut as he sat across from her, the pup now tumbling between them in playful bounds. "This is the Heartvine, where the first packs forged their bond with the land. The Empire fears it, calls it cursed ground. They hunt us to sever the roots, to claim the wilds for their stone cities." His eyes held hers, golden depths swirling with sorrow and steel. "As for you," The pup chose you. His mother's line traces to the old guardians, like yours. Faint, diluted by human fear. But there, I felt it when I touched you. The spark of kin. Kin. The word wrapped around her like vines, both comforting and constricting. Elara's mind reeled, memories surfacing like drowned bodies. Nights as a girl, slipping into the woods to watch the packs, feeling an inexplicable kinship that terrified her. Her father had beaten the wanderlust out of her, calling it devilry, but it had lingered. A shadow hunger. Now, with hunters baying above, it roared to life. "I can't. I'm not like you," she protested, but her voice cracked, betraying the lie. The pup nuzzled her hand, its silver eyes mirroring her turmoil, and she stroked its fur, tears blurring her vision. "They'll kill us all. The village turned on your kind for scraps of peace. What makes you think I'll fight?" Voikael leaned forward, his presence a magnetic force, the air between them charged with unspoken longing. "Because you've already started, holding him through the night. That was the first defiance. The Empire takes everything, packs, homes, the very soul of the wild. But you carry the bridge, human enough to walk among them, wild enough to run with us." His hand covered hers, rough and calloused, sending sparks racing up her arm. In that touch she saw flashes of his pain, the fall of his queen to Empire arrows, the scattering of his sons, the throne now a pyre of loss. Loneliness mirrored her own, two souls adrift in the storm. A rumble shook the cavern, dust sifting from the ceiling as shouts echoed from above. Boots on stone, the clash of metal. The hunters had breached the temple. Kale rose, his form blurring at the edges, but he paused, looking back at her. "Choose now, Elara. Run to your old life, and they'll brand you traitor. Stay, and the blood awakens. Painful, but true. I'll claim you as pack, protect you with my last breath, but the beast within demands sacrifice." Her heart tore, the pup whining at the tension. Above, a voice bellowed, "The witch and the whelp! Burn the den!" Firelight flickered through the passage, acrid smoke seeping in. Elara's body trembled, the hum in her veins surging into a burn, her nails lengthening slightly, instinctively, as if claws yearned to emerge. Fear and fury warred within, but beneath it, a fierce resolve bloomed, the love for the fragile life in her arms. The impossible pull toward this scarred king, who saw her not as outcast but as equal. She stood, dagger sheathed, meeting his gaze. "I stay. For him. For whatever this is." The words sealed it, a vow whispered to the cavern's glowing heart. Kyle nodded, a ghost of a smile breaking through his grief, and shifted fully to Wolf, his howl a thunderous call that shook the waters. Elara felt the change ripple through her too, not full transformation, but a strengthening, her senses sharpening, the forest's whispers clarifying into urgent warnings. They fled deeper into the tunnels, the pup clutched tight as the cavern filled with the roar of flames and pursuit. The path twisted like veins toward hidden exits, but Elara knew this was no escape, it was a forging. Bonds tempered in shadow, a queen rising from the embers of doubt. Outside, the storm raged on, but within her, dawn's fire kindled, promising violence and tenderness intertwined, a destiny claimed under the weight of the wild. The tunnels twisted like the innards of some colossal beast, their walls slick with moisture that dripped in rhythmic echoes, syncing with the frantic beat of Elara's heart. She ran beside Kale's wolf form, the pup tucked securely in the fold of her cloak, its tiny claws digging into her skin for purchase. The air grew thicker underground, heavy with the scent of earth and forgotten roots, the bioluminescent glow from the heart vein fading into oppressive shadow. Shouts from the hunters reverberated behind them, muffled but relentless, punctuated by the crackle of flames devouring the temple above. Smoke curled into the passages like vengeful spirits, stinging her eyes and choking her throat. Kyle's massive frame led the way, his golden eyes cutting through the dark like twin lanterns. He moved with lethal precision, pausing at forks in the path to sniff the air, ears twitching at the faintest shift. Elara's legs burned, her wound a dull fire now overshadowed by the surge in her veins, the old blood awakening, sharpening her senses until she could hear the hunter's boots scraping stone, smell the sweat of their fear mingled with torch oil. It was intoxicating and terrifying, this half-formed power, like claws itching beneath her nails, urging her to turn and rend. A low rumble built ahead, the ground trembling as if the earth itself protested their flight. Kyle slowed, hackles rising, and shifted mid-stride into his human form, swift, seamless, his fur cloak swirling around him like living shadow. "The river," he said, voice a urgent growl. "It leads to the outer wilds, but the current's treacherous. Hold to me." He extended a hand, scarred and steady, and Elara took it without hesitation, the contact sending a jolt through her, a shared pulse, wild and ancient, binding them in the chaos. They burst into a wider chamber where the subterranean stream swelled into a roaring torrent, foaming over jagged rocks that gleamed like bared teeth. The water's roar drowned the hunter's cries, but Elara knew it was temporary. The Empire's dogs were bred for the hunt, relentless as the tide. She clutched the pup tighter, its whimpers lost in the din, and followed Kale to the edge. The drop was sheer, the river below a churning maw that promised swift passage or watery graves. "Jump!" Kyle commanded, his eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that stripped away her fears. In that gaze, she saw not just the king, but the man, the weight of a crown forged in loss, the quiet desperation of one who had howled alone too long. Something unspoken passed between them, a thread of impossible longing woven from shared solitude. Elara nodded, heart leaping as they plunged together. The cold hit like 1,000 needles, the current yanking them under in a whirl of bubbles and darkness. Elara thrashed, lungs burning, the pup's warmth her only tether. Kyle's arm wrapped around her waist, strong as iron roots, pulling her to the surface. They surfaced, gasping, the river carrying them through a narrow fissure in the cavern wall, out into the open wilds, where the storm had eased to a mournful mist. Boulders lined the banks, slick and mossy, and overhanging branches clawed at the sky like skeletal fingers. The forest here was older, denser, its trees towering sentinels with bark etched in runes that pulsed faintly as if alive. Kyle hauled her onto a gravel bar, the pup shaking water from its fur with indignant yips. Elara collapsed beside him, coughing river from her lungs, her body trembling from the chill and the adrenaline's ebb. The wound on her side had reopened, blood mixing with mud in rivulets down her ribs, but she barely felt it. Instead, a deeper ache bloomed, the pull of the blood, demanding more, whispering of changes she wasn't ready to face. Her fingers flexed, nails sharper than before, and a low growl escaped her throat unbidden, startling her into silence. Kyle knelt before her, his cloak sodden and clinging, revealing the map of scars across his chest, marks of betrayal, of battles where pack turned on pack under Empire gold. He tore a strip from the hem, binding her wound with careful hands, his touch lingering just long enough to stir embers in her core. "You're changing," he murmured, golden eyes tracing her face. "The river accelerates it. The old blood doesn't sleep quietly once roused." His voice held a mix of awe and sorrow, as if he knew the price all too well, the isolation of the shift, the hunger that blurred the line between protector and predator. Elara met his gaze, the mist curling around them like a veil, softening the world's harsh edges. "What if I don't want it?" she whispered, voice raw. The pup nudged her hand, its silver eyes innocent mirrors to her turmoil, and she stroked its damp fur, drawing comfort from its trust. Memories flooded her, the village's scorn, her father's fists, the nights she'd lain awake yearning for the howls beyond the palisade. This power terrified her, but so did the emptiness of turning back, of leaving this scarred king to his throne of thorns, the pup to a world that devoured the weak. Cale's hand cupped her cheek, thumb brushing a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. Want has no place in destiny, Elara. It chooses us, like the pup chose you. I've lost everything to this blood, my mate torn from me in the fields of ash, my brothers scattered by the Empire's lies. But you, holding him through the night, you reminded me of what we fight for, not just survival, but the wild's heart beating in harmony. His words wrapped around her like the mist, heavy with unspoken claim, a love forged in the crucible of pursuit, tender yet fierce, impossible yet inevitable. A distant splash shattered the moment. Hunters, navigating the river upstream, their torches flickering like malevolent eyes through the fog. Kyle rose, shifting partially, claws extending as a snarl built in his chest. They won't stop! The Alpha's claim draws them like moths to flame. He glanced at her, vulnerability cracking his regal mask. Fight with me or flee, but know this, if you stay, the sacrifice cuts deep. The beast demands your humanity's edge. Elara stood, the pup at her heels, the river's chill hardening into resolve. Her body hummed, senses flaring. The rustle of leaves, a chorus of warnings. The hunter's sense sharp as betrayal. Claws pricked her fingertips, a partial shift rippling through her, fur ghosting over her arms before receding. Pain lanced her soul, a tearing of the self she'd known, but beneath it bloomed strength, a wild song echoing her mother's lost howls. I fight, she said, voice steady as the ancient trees, for him, for us. Kyle's eyes blazed with pride and something deeper, a possessive fire that claimed without words. He shifted fully, nuzzling her hand in wolf form, then bounded into the underbrush, Elara following on two legs that felt poised for four. The mist swallowed them, the chase resuming in a blur of shadow and fury. Behind, the hunters closed in, but ahead lay the heart of the wilds, a realm of ruins and rebirth, where a queen's transformation awaited, sealed in blood and unbreakable bond. The pup yipped once, a spark of hope in the gathering dusk as the forest closed ranks around its fledgling pack. The mist wove through the ancient wilds like threads of forgotten dreams, cloaking the towering oaks in a veil that blurred the line between tree and shadow. Elara's boots sank into the loamy earth, each step a negotiation with roots that twisted like serpents, alive with the forest's watchful pulse. The pup bounded ahead, its silver eyes catching glints of fading light, while Cale's wolf form flanked her, a silent guardian whose golden gaze scanned the underbrush for threats. The river's roar had dwindled behind them, replaced by the hush of leaves sighing in the wind, but the hunter's pursuit lingered, a distant clamor of snapping branches and muffled curses, closing like a noose drawn tight. Her body thrummed with the old blood's insistent call, a fever that burned beneath her skin, sharpening her hearing to the rustle of a squirrel's flight, the drip of dew from ferns. Claws had retracted, but the ghost of them prickled her fingertips, a reminder of the fracture within. Elara's breath came ragged, not just from the run, but from the war raging in her chest. The human girl who mended nets and baked bread, clashing against this emergent beast, hungry for the wild's embrace. She glanced at Cale, his massive frame weaving through the mist with effortless power, and felt that impossible pull deepen, a tether forged in the river's depths, binding her to his scarred solitude. They crested a ridge, the forest opening to a ravine where crumbling spires of an old watchtower jutted from the earth like broken teeth. Vines choked the stones, their leaves heavy with rain, and the air carried the faint, acrid bite of charred wood, remnants of some long-ago siege. Kyle halted, ears flattening as a fresh howl split the air, closer now, laced with the Empire's crude horns. He shifted in a blur of fur and flesh, rising to his human form beside her, chest heaving, the fur cloak slipping to reveal the taut lines of muscle etched with silver scars. "They're tracking the pup's scent," he said, voice low and edged with gravel. "We make our stand here. The ruins hold echoes of the old magic, wards that can turn the tide if we reach the altar." Elara nodded, though doubt coiled in her gut like smoke. The pup pressed against her leg, whining softly, its warmth a fragile spark against the encroaching cold. She knelt, burying her face in its damp fur, inhaling the earthy scent that grounded her. "What if I can't control it?" she murmured, more to herself than him. The partial shift in the river had torn at her, visions of her mother's fate flashing, dragged through the village square, stoned for the sin of the beast within. Sacrifice. The word echoed Kyle's warning, a blade hovering over her humanity. Yet in the pup's trusting gaze, she saw purpose, a love that demanded she embrace the pain. Kyle's hand found her shoulder, firm yet tender, his touch igniting embers along her spine. "You already have. The blood doesn't take without consent of the heart." His golden eyes held hers, depths swirling with the storm of his own losses, the Queen's final howl, the Pack's betrayal under Empire whispers. In that shared silence, tenderness bloomed amid the violence, a quiet claim that spoke of nights to come, bodies entwined under moonlit canopies, healing wounds no blade could touch. But the moment shattered as shadows stirred at the ravine's edge. Figures in oiled cloaks, crossbows glinting, their leader barking orders with the arrogance of conquerors. The first bolt whistled through the mist, embedding in a vine inches from Elara's head. She scooped the pup and bolted toward the ruins, Kyle shifting back to Wolf in an instant, his roar a thunderclap that shook the leaves. He lunged, massive jaws snapping at the nearest hunter, tearing cloth and flesh in a spray of blood that painted the stones crimson. Elara scrambled over fallen masonry, heart pounding, the old blood surging in response. Pain lanced her limbs as fur rippled unbidden over her arms, her vision sharpening to the hunter's frantic movements, their fear sweat sharp, their breaths ragged. She wasn't fully shifting, not yet, but the power lent her speed, claws emerging to slash at a grasping hand that reached for her cloak. They fought through the spires, the ruins awakening with spectral whispers, runes on the stones flickering to life, blue flames dancing along the edges, repelling bolts with bursts of ethereal force. Kyle was a whirlwind of fury, his wolf form a blur as he felled two hunters, their screams swallowed by the mist. But numbers pressed them, more poured from the tree line, blades drawn, chanting empire litanies of purification. Elara backed against the altar, a cracked slab at the tower's heart, etched with wolf motifs that pulsed like a heartbeat. The pup yipped in alarm, and she set it down, drawing her dagger with trembling hands that felt too strong, too feral. A hunter lunged, his axe swinging in a deadly arc. Elara dodged, the blade grazing her arm, drawing blood that sizzled on the stone. The pain ignited something primal. She countered with a snarl, claws raking his face, sending him sprawling. But another seized her from behind, arm locking around her throat, the pup snapping at his boots. Panic surged, the world narrowing to the crush of breath, the beast within roaring for release. "Let it out," Kyle's voice cut through, distant yet urgent, as he battled three foes, blood matting his fur. She twisted, elbow driving into her captor's ribs, and broke free, stumbling to the altar. Her hands slammed onto the stone, and the runes blazed, a wave of energy rippling outward, staggering the hunters. But the effort tore at her, a full shift threatening, bones aching as if reshaping, the line between woman and wolf blurring. Visions assaulted her. Running free with Kale's pack, the pup grown strong at her side, but at a cost. Her village's face twisted in horror, the humanity she'd clung to dissolving like mist at dawn. Sacrifice cut deep, a blade to the soul, but in the agony, clarity bloomed. This was her destiny, woven from solitude into unbreakable bond. Kyle reached her side, human once more, bloodied but unbowed, pulling her into his arms as the wards flared brighter, forcing the hunters to retreat into the fog. "You did it," he breathed against her hair, his hold possessive, laced with the raw ache of love that defied empires. The pup nuzzled between them, a bridge of innocence amid the carnage. Elara leaned into him, the shift receding, leaving her exhausted but whole, the scars of change etching her spirit. The mist lifted slightly, revealing a path deeper into the wilds, toward hidden dens and rising moons. Yet the hunter's horns blared anew, rallying for another push. Kyle's eyes met hers, golden fire promising protection, passion, a claim sealed in blood and shadow. "The heart of the wilds calls," he said, voice a vow. "There we rebuild, or fall together." Elara rose, the pup in her arms, strength forged from the night's trials flowing through her veins. The forest whispered approval, leaves rustling like distant howls as they pressed on, the bond between them aflame against the encroaching dark, destiny's path lit by sacrifice and the tender promise of dawn. The wilds deepened into a labyrinth of thorns and whispers, where the mist clung like a lover's reluctant farewell, veiling paths that twisted toward forgotten hearts. Elara's feet ached on the uneven ground, each stride pulling her further from the ruin's fading glow, the pup's weight a constant grounding warmth against her chest. Kale loped ahead in wolf form, his silver-streaked pelt blending with the encroaching dusk, but he circled back often, golden eyes checking her, urging her onward with a nudge of his muzzle that sent shivers of connection through her skin. The hunter's horns had fallen silent, swallowed by the forest's vast indifference, but the air hummed with their unseen approach. Attention coiled like a spring, ready to unleash. Her body betrayed her at every turn, the old blood simmering just beneath the surface. A restless tide that ebbed and flowed with her breaths. Fur ghosted over her forearms in fleeting waves, retracting with a sting that left her skin raw, as if shedding an old skin too tight to bear. The partial shift at the altar had cracked something open inside her, unleashing not just power, but a flood of memories that weren't entirely her own. Visions of ancient packs under storm-lashed skies, howls weaving spells against the encroaching stone empires, a lineage of women like her mother, bridges between worlds, torn asunder by fear. Elara pressed a hand to her temple, the pup whining in sympathy, its tiny tongue lapping at her chin. "Not yet," she murmured to herself, voice lost in the rustle of leaves. But the beast within growled back, hungry for release, promising freedom at the cost of everything familiar. They descended into a hollow ringed by colossal evergreens, their trunks scarred by lightning's ancient fury, branches interlocking overhead to form a cathedral of shadow. At the center lay a pool, its surface mirror still, reflecting the bruised purple of the sky like a wound in the earth. Kyle shifted as they approached, his human form emerging with a sigh that carried the weight of exhaustion, sweat and blood tracing rivulets down his broad chest. He knelt by the water's edge, dipping his fingers in and tracing runes on the damp soil, wards, faint but flickering to life, a temporary veil against pursuit. "This is the Veil Pool," he said, his voice roughened by the day's toll, golden eyes reflecting the pool's eerie calm. "It shows truths hidden in the blood. Drink if you dare, Elara. Face what stirs in you before the hunters force it out." She hesitated, the pup squirming to lap at the water, its form shimmering briefly in the ripples, a glimpse of the alpha it might become, strong and unyielding. The air here was thick with the scent of pine sap and damp stone, mingled with something sweeter, like wild honey laced with sorrow. Elara's wound throbbed in rhythm with her pulse, a reminder of the fragility she clung to, but Kale's gaze pulled at her, that impossible love blooming in the spaces between their silences. Tender glances amid the violence, a brush of hands that spoke of nights yet to come, bodies healing in the wild's embrace. He was no distant king here. He was raw, vulnerable, the scars on his soul laid bare in the way he watched her, as if she were the dawn he'd long awaited. Kneeling beside him, she cupped the water, its chill biting like truth's edge. It tasted of earth and starlight, sliding down her throat to ignite a blaze in her core. The world tilted, the pool's surface rippling without touch. And suddenly she was falling, not into water, but into herself. Visions crashed over her, her mother's final shift, fur erupting in the village square as stones pelted her flanks, a howl of defiance cut short by silence. Then deeper, Elara as a child, slipping into the woods, bones aching with unspoken change, her father's rage a chain that bound her human, and Kale. His queen's blood soaking the forest floor, her eyes locking on his, in a plea mirrored in the pup's mother, the Empire's arrows felling the last of his line. Loss upon loss, a tapestry of sacrifice that wove their fates together. She gasped, surfacing from the trance, tears streaming hot down her cheeks. The pup nuzzled her, but it was Kyle who pulled her close, his arms a fortress against the unraveling. "See," he whispered, his breath warm against her ear, carrying the musk of fur and resolve. "The blood doesn't curse, it remembers. Your mother was one of us, a guardian who chose silence to protect you. But the wild calls louder now. The hunters won't stop until the packs are ghosts, until the old magic fades." His fingers traced her jaw, a touch both possessive and pleading, igniting sparks that blurred the line between fear and desire. In his eyes, she saw the claim deepen, not just of pack, but of heart. A love forged in the crucible of destiny, tender as a pup's trust, fierce as a king's roar. A crack echoed through the hollow, branches snapping under heavy tread. The hunters had breached the outer wards, their torches piercing the mist like accusatory stars. Kyle rose, shifting partially, claws extending as his snarl built. "They've scented the pool's magic. We can't run forever." Elara stood, the vision's fire hardening into steel within her. The old blood surged, no longer a whisper but a demand, her nails lengthening into claws that itched to fight. Pain twisted through her. A harbinger of the full transformation lurking, the sacrifice it required. The girl she'd been, dissolving into the beast that could save them, or doom her to endless hunger. The first hunter burst from the tree line, crossbow raised, his face twisted in zealous fury. Elara moved without thought, a growl tearing from her throat as she lunged, claws raking his arm, sending him sprawling into the underbrush. Kyle was beside her in an instant, his wolf form tearing into another, jaws clamping with lethal precision. The fight erupted in a frenzy of steel and shadow, bolts whizzing past as Elara dodged and struck, her body adapting, senses flaring to track movements, strength blooming from the pain. The pup darted to the pool's edge, yipping warnings, its tiny form a beacon of what they protected. But the numbers swelled, hunters circling the hollow, their leader, a scarred captain with Empire insignia gleaming, barking orders that chilled her blood. "The witch awakens! Take the whelp alive! The king dies tonight!" A net whistled through the air, tangling Kyle mid-leap, weighted chains dragging him down. Elara's heart seized, the beast roaring to full life. She charged, claws slashing ropes, but a bolt grazed her shoulder, fire blooming as she fell to her knees beside him. Blood pooled, hers and his mingling on the earth, and in that shared wound the transformation crested, not full shift, but a bridge, her form blurring as power poured from the pool, vines erupting to ensnare the attackers. Kyle freed himself, shifting fully to rip through the fray, but the captain seized the moment, lunging for the pup. Elara intercepted, her body a whirlwind of half-formed fury, tackling him into the water. They thrashed, the pool's magic amplifying her strength, claws sinking into his armor as visions of all the lost, mothers, queens, packs, fueled her rage. He struck back, blade slicing her side, deepening the old wound, but she held, the pup safe on the bank, until Kale's jaws closed around the captain's throat, ending the threat in a spray of finality. The remaining hunters fled into the mist, their cries echoing like defeated ghosts, but victory tasted of ash. Elara collapsed against Kale, her body trembling as the shift receded, leaving her more scarred, more wild. Blood soaked them both, the pool now churning with crimson swirls, a symbolic baptism. He nuzzled her neck in wolf form, a low rumble of gratitude and claim vibrating through her, the pup curling between them in exhausted trust. The hollow fell silent, save for their ragged breaths, the mist lifting to reveal stars piercing the canopy, harbingers of the true climax yet to come. Deeper in the wilds, where destiny demanded one final sacrifice. Yet in that fragile peace, Elara felt the bond solidify, a love impossible no longer, woven from pain and purpose. The forest sighed around them, ancient and approving. As they rose together, the path ahead lit by inner fire, toward the heart where kings fell and queens were born. The stars wheeled overhead like distant eyes, indifferent witnesses to the hollow's bloodied hush, as Elara and Kale pressed deeper into the wild's embrace. The mist had thinned to gossamer threads, revealing glimpses of the forest's ancient core. Trees whose trunks twisted into colossal forms, branches arching like the ribs of fallen giants, leaves whispering secrets in a tongue older than empires. The pup trotted between them, its silver fur catching the moonlight in fleeting gleams, a spark of innocence amid the gathering shadows. Elara's steps faltered now and then, her body a battlefield where the old blood waged war, claws pricking her palms, vision flickering between human clarity and predatory sharpness, the pull toward full surrender growing with every heartbeat. Kyle's wolf form brushed against her side, a reassuring warmth that chased the chill from her bones, but his golden eyes held a shadowed urgency, as if he sensed the precipice they neared. The path sloped downward, roots giving way to smooth stone steps worn by centuries of paws and feet, leading to a glade encircled by a ring of monoliths. At its heart stood the heart of the wilds, a colossal oak, its bark etched with glowing runes that pulsed like veins, roots delving into a chasm that exhaled breaths of warm, fertile earth. The air hummed here, thick with the scent of blooming night flowers and smouldering embers, a nexus where the veil between worlds frayed to threads. They entered the glade as the first hints of pre-dawn grey bled into the sky, the pup yipping excitedly as it scampered toward the oak. Kyle shifted, rising to his full height beside Elara, his fur cloak falling open to reveal the fresh gashes from the hollow's fray, wounds that wept crimson, mirroring her own reopened side. "This is it," he said, voice a low rumble laced with both reverence and dread. "The heart binds the packs, awakens the true blood. But it demands truth, no half measures. The hunters will follow the pull. We have moments." His hand found hers, calloused fingers intertwining, and in that grasp she felt the depth of his claim, not mere possession, but a sharing of souls, forged from the night's endless trials. Love, impossible in its wild ferocity, bloomed between them, tender as the pup's nuzzle, fierce as the scars they bore. Elara's throat tightened, the visions from the Vale Pool replaying in flashes, her mother's stoning, the queen's dying gaze, the pup's mother's plea. The old blood surged, a tidal roar in her veins, urging her to the oak. She released Kale's hand, kneeling before the trunk, the pup curling against her knees with a soft whine. Her fingers traced the runes, and they ignited under her touch, flooding her with light that seared like fire. Pain erupted, bones grinding, skin stretching, a howl building in her chest that tore free as fur cascaded over her form. She arched, claws digging into the earth, the transformation cresting in waves of agony that stripped away the girl she'd been. The village fears, the father's chains, the solitude of hearths and empty nights. What she lost was the divide, the safe illusion of humanity, the walls that had kept the wild at bay. In its place, truth emerged. She was the bridge, wild-hearted and unbroken, a queen in fur and fang. Kyle watched, his face etched with pride and sorrow, as her shift completed. She rose on all fours, a she-wolf sleek and silver-marked, eyes glowing with the same golden fire as his. The pup bounded to her, nuzzling her flank, and she returned the gesture, a rumble of pack bond vibrating through them. But the moment shattered as horns blared from the tree line. The hunters, drawn inexorably, their torches a swarm of angry fireflies. The captain's voice cut through, ragged but triumphant. The beasts converge. End them at the heart. They came in a tide. Crossbows loosing bolts that whistled like vengeful winds, blades gleaming with empire steel. Kyle shifted fully, lunging into the fray with a roar that shook the monoliths, his jaws claiming the first hunter in a spray of final screams. Elara joined him, her new form a blur of instinct and fury, claws rending armor, teeth snapping at throats. The glade became a maelstrom of violence and beauty, blood arcing like rain, howls mingling with cries, the oak's runes flaring to shield them, vines erupting to ensnare foes. She fought not as prey, but as guardian, the pup darting to safety behind the trunk, its yips a clarion of defiance. Yet the tide pressed, hunters swarming the ring, their numbers bolstered by reinforcements from the shadows. A bolt struck Kale's shoulder, staggering him mid-leap, and the captain seized the gap, charging Elara with a spear aimed for her heart. She dodged, but the tip grazed her chest, drawing a line of fire that spilled her blood onto the sacred earth. Pain crested again, but this time it fueled her, the sacrifice complete, her humanity's last tether severed in the gush of red. With a howl that echoed her mother's lost cry, she countered, pinning the captain beneath her paws, jaws hovering at his throat. Mercy flickered, the village girl pleading for peace, but the queen within ended it swiftly, a snap that silenced his zeal forever. The hunters faltered, the oak's power surging in response to her blood, roots bursting forth to crush and drag the remnants into the chasm's maw. Silence fell, broken only by the rustle of leaves and their labored breaths. Elara shifted back, collapsing beside Kyle, her body trembling as the change settled, leaving her human once more, but transformed, scars tracing her skin like maps of rebirth. The wound on her chest throbbed, a permanent mark, silver-edged like his own, symbol of the loss that revealed her truth. Kyle pulled her into his arms, his lips brushing the new scar in a kiss that sealed the claim, gentle, possessive, laced with the salt of tears and blood. "My queen," he murmured, golden eyes holding hers in a silent vow, the pup wedged between them, tail wagging in quiet triumph. Dawn broke then, sunlight piercing the canopy in golden shafts, bathing the glade in warmth that chased the last shadows away. The wilds stirred, howls rising from distant packs, drawn by the heart's awakening, a renaissance forged in sacrifice, where solitude yielded to unbreakable bond, death to hope's tender flame. Elara leaned into him, the ache of loss fading into purpose, her hand stroking the pup's fur as the forest exhaled in approval. The Empire's hunt would rage on, but here, at dawn's edge, they stood as one, alpha, and claimed, hearts entwined in the wild's eternal rhythm.